Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show we're talking about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1, Episode 6 of The Imperfects. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I do love that they use the exact comparison I used last episode of the Jekyll and Hyde circumstance, and even making a comparison to Juan, which he's like, no, the difference is the chupacabra is all instinct, like I said, and what is Isabel is more so, she's able to plan stuff out, so it's different. It's like, oh, it sounds like you're trying to justify murder or whatever, and he's like, wouldn't you? And Abby's like, yeah, considering the circumstance, I absolutely would, but ultimately, Hannah's gonna try and leave. But, her and Abby have their moments, which is, once again, I still do believe Tilda can be mean-spirited. Sometimes she can say stuff she doesn't always mean, but I think it's like an overcompensation. It's like she's very snarky. She's very, mean-girlish to some extent, because I think that is, her way of kind of dealing with just the craziness of their circumstances. And it's easier to lash out at people, and everything, but she overhears the whole Abby and Hannah thing. I was like, ooh, now that's an interesting development. Because at first I was like, oh, they seem like they're getting close, and then that scene starts leaning into it. I'm like, oh, okay, I see where we're going with this. And I love that, you immediately have Tilda bouncing between both conversations, and even Juan trying to keep up. It's like, oh, wait, he's like, oh, you're talking about Sydney and Sarkov? Is like, no, I'm talking about Hannah and Abby. It's like, ooh, that's the right thing to say, Hannah. And then says something else. He's like, oh, that's Hannah and Abby. It's like, no, dumbass, it's Sarkov and Sydney. I'm just like, it's not his fault. He can't hear the conversation. He doesn't know when you're switching over to a different conversation you're listening in on. But I did like also him giving her the example of basically, which is very much kind of like the Superman, I think, approach of just stripping the layers away when you have super hearing, of stripping away everything, focusing on one sound at a time. And I love Juan, speaking a language she could understand, music, use it like a music track, just peel away everything until you're only listening to that part of the track you're trying to listen to. And that's when she hears Flux roll up, and they're rolling super, super deep. At the same time, there's the whole situation with Sarkov and Sydney working on this whole trying to find a cure thing, but understanding her circumstances because of the way her shift works in comparison to Juan's or something. It really could hold the answers to really understanding everything. Because I also thought it was interesting too that Sarkov is how the hell did Yates figure this out? There's no way he could have it's yeah, but they kind of brushed that off, but it makes me wonder if Sarkov's kind of implying there's no way Yates got that on his own. He must have went to somebody about that. So maybe there's someone else who knows some of the science about this. I was like, not unless it's about Dominique Crane, but I'm I doubt that. So it must be about something. There might be some other scientific player at play here that Yates was kind of communicating with before Isabel ended up killing him. Maybe not. But I do love kind of doing the test results of that. And once again, Alex being such a dickweed that there's all those pictures of Isabel, and there's even that one where he's got to take a selfie picture with her. I'm like, you're such a dick. But it is kind of what I thought, where it's she's basically kind of Sydney's fractured psyche. Even Sarkov even went as far as saying oh, you're basically her id. It's this is the side of Sydney that's kind of standing up for herself, because she's very I think almost she kind of just accepts the world kind of rolling over her, and Isabel is the side of her that's nah, fuck that, I'm not dealing with that anymore, and especially I'm not going to be dealing with your bullshit. It's the reason why she hates him a lot, because yes, it is his research that led to all this, but it's also he messed her up with just their relationship and everything between them, is what really messed her up. And I think it still kind of weighs heavy on her, and I think Isabel probably still sees that as weakness, that she's being bound by Alex, because in her mind, Alex is the biggest piece of shit, and he's not worth, like, fretting over or even, like, wasting any brain power or space in your mind for. So, But yeah, we meet the illustrious Dominique Crane, who is played by the same actress. I was like, I just saw her in what was the fourth and sadly final season of Roswell, New Mexico. She plays Shivani, and I was like, oh man, that's so interesting. I was about to say, it's like, oh, she's playing a scientist again. I was like, well, to be fair, Shivani, there were scientific elements related to her character in the story, without spoiling it for anyone that hasn't seen it, but she wasn't really a scientist, you know, that was more so like her wife's angle. So, but it's like, yeah, it's just interesting. I feel bad because she kind of plays, I feel like Shivani was a lot more of a sympathetic character than Dominique. Dominique, they're making her just be like, nah, she kind of sucks. She's almost kind of like Jessica, because Jessica, I want to say that's her character's name from Yellow Jackets. I don't remember, but it's like, she was kind of scummy there, but it's like, oh, Dominique seems like the bigger, scummier character that she's playing, which I feel like, very complex characters, but she has that like sinister element about her, where she's like almost like smart, like her, like when she plays a character, she plays them in like that. I think she probably leans into those characters that, you know, it's like they smile while they're secretly stabbing you in the back at the same time. It feels like that, especially with Dominique being like, hey, this is so friendly, just surrender. Kind of is like, this kind of escalated into a little bit of a back and forth. And it only came down to this because it's like, well, you know, everything at the lab and everything. It's like, well, your guy was trying to kill Juan and his family. It's like, yeah, but then the lab thing is like, well, your people were going to cut us open and experiment. It's like, if those were our people, we'd be having a very different conversation right now. So it's like, right, need you to basically surrender. And I look the entire time out because like, wait, they didn't ask about me? It's like, no, I guess they don't know you're here. Are you sure they don't know I'm here? It's like, do you want me to let them know you're here? It's like, okay, fine. You know, so they're going to try and work on a cure down below. But really quickly, staying on the subject of Sarkov and not just Sydney, but also Isabel, which we did learn an interesting thing where, because of like the shifting of her body in so many ways, obviously he took a lot of like samples from her arm, and whenever she's Isabel, the wounds are there, but when she's Sydney, those wounds are on her arm, but then she's like, they might be on my kidneys. Like, it's like her whole body like basically rearranges and morphs, and it's like basically the synthetic stem cells in her body shift a little bit before they shift into something else before they turn into Isabel. So like there's just so much on her body that changes and morphs. I mean, we kind of saw it last episode, like when she was shifting, like you saw like a nose pop up on her face. Like her entire body is like remapping and restructuring itself. So it's like, right, so it's almost like they are two separate entities, but it's like, right, because they share the same DNA and everything. So they are essentially the same person from top to bottom, like, you know, on a like DNA scan level wise and stuff. So it's like almost like, you know, very Jekyll and Hyde of like, hey, we are sharing the same body, because you are essentially the same person down to your cores, essentially. Like I said, just the example I used last episode is like two sides of the same coin. But either way, Isabel was basically telling Alex, like, right, she doesn't trust you anymore, and she never will. She wants to believe that you'll do the right thing in the end, but we both know your selfishness will get the best of you. You want to make it seem like you're doing this out of like, oh, you're going to find a cure, but it's like, no, you're going to be the selfish prick you always are, which he kind of is, because in the end, he's like, yeah, we can work towards a cure when the time's appropriate. She's like, no, we need to cure the kids now. He's like, come on. Like, he wants the work to continue now, because it's like, for him, it's probably like, I'm on the cusp of advancing the human race, so we're prepared for, you know, avoiding our potential extinction when the time comes, like 100 years from now. But she basically holds, what was it, modern, was it poetry or something like that? It's like, he's like, you swore you wouldn't say that. He was like, I was a young 8-year-old boy, and she throws it in his face again. He's like, I shouldn't have never told you that. I'm like, what is so embarrassing in that? Because he was like, yeah, I was a young kid that couldn't accept failure. I'm like, he must have done something shady. Like, I guess, like, his pride as being so smart and as a prodigy probably won't allow him to ever outwardly admit that maybe he cheated or went about getting an A, like, even at such a young age. Because you try to be like, oh, I was an 8-year-old, like, it doesn't count, doesn't matter. It's like, he must have done something that his pride won't let him, you know, like, because her knowing that information and spreading that out, that would probably like ruin his reputation, even if it was something all those years ago. It's like he's too narcissistic to ever. It's like, fine, I'll help cure the kids, because things get super complicated because, well, given the opportunity, Hannah was going to surrender herself because you have Tilda like ripping into her, which understandable, because for Tilda it's like you were basically leading. You might not have known about Burke and Finch. It's like, yeah, it's like, because she's like, yeah, it's fine. At the end, they end up being the same person, so it's all fine. But for Tilda, it's like, you didn't know that at the time. You were setting this all up. The fact of the matter is, you know, and I'm not going to let you hurt anyone here that I care about. It's like, yeah, she cares about Abby and Juan, so she didn't want to have Hannah around to kind of jeopardize that. And Hannah was going to turn herself over. Well, at least it's like, right, I have nothing to do with this because she's not one of the she's not one of the GP's. Well, Jeep says they just call it a GP's gifted persons. Which, once again, when Dominique was talking, she was like, "Oh, this conversation could go very differently." And it's like, right, you guys are. Once again, it's that thing of you're a danger, and you know we step in just to see whether or not you really are a danger, because they're like. Abby's like, we're only a danger when we're provoked. It's like, it's always been in self-defense that they've really fought back. But, once again, it is that case of like, yeah, Sponson, he's the one who started shit. Like, the way he went about going about things with, Juan, but for him it's like, yeah, the only good monster is a dead monster. He's like, they can't be trusted, like they're too much of a wild experiment. You can't like let them run rampant. And ultimately a shot was fired because they saw Juan trying to pull Abby back in, and sadly Hannah got hit in a moment, and Abby, obviously frustrated and scared, like literally she's like, it feels like I don't even really know her, and it feels like my heart is being ripped out of my chest. And it's like, Juan says, you don't need to know someone that long for you to care about them. And she kind of blames Abby, because, I mean, Abby blames Tilda, because it's like, right, you shouldn't have said what you did. You're the one that kind of pushed Hannah out that door, which even Tilda kind of blames herself, because it's like, right, me being me, like, led to all of this. And Juan's trying to be like, hey, no, it's okay. So Abby decides to take the serum that made Doug what he is and plans to give it to Hannah, which is like, oh, it's like, do you really want to do that? I mean, Doug was miserable. It's like, yes, but Hannah shouldn't be able to make that choice for herself. She should have that opportunity. She should have that choice and not just have to simply die. So, but I mean, it's like, right, Hannah, like, luckily walked away from all this not being anything, but now you're kind of making her one now too, so that's going to be complicated. I am curious, like, based on what we saw later on, the fact is that Hannah, like, came, like, supercharged punched, and I'm like, oh, I wonder, I mean, I don't know if he was necessarily superhumanly strong. I mean, he had probably, I don't know, because it's not like, because no one on that group has, like, superhuman strength, and he is, like, a grown adult choking Tilda, so that might have just been enough. So I don't know if he had any superhuman strength or not. They never really had an opportunity to really display that necessarily. Like, he tossed people around, but once again, they're, like, teenagers / young adults, or, like, him tossing them around, he's, like, an older person, so I don't know. Well, no, because I forgot. He did say, like, he did get, like, enhanced strength and stuff. So, because I was wondering, like, did it affect Hannah differently? But I think it was the same thing that made Doug. So, you do get, like, you enhance speed and superhuman strength plus the immortality. So, it's like, right. So, she's checking off the boxes to be like, because I was wondering if it would affect her a little bit differently, just because you'd assume, like, hey, regardless, because it's just interesting that everything... Because I was wondering if it would affect her body differently than it did. Like, you know, it's like, oh, if she got what Juan got, would that have made it so, like, oh, would she become a chupacabra too? Or would it manifest into some other creature? I'm assuming it's kind of laced into the synthetic stuff itself. So no matter what you get, you will always get, like, say, like, once again, she got what Abby had, she would have pheromone powers. Like, it's in the... What that does to you is it's stuck inside of the stem cells, and it just latches onto you. So I think that the vial or whatever stem cells they use specifically, whichever ones were used on so-and-so to give them their respective abilities, I think that's when it really, really comes through of like, okay, that's that's going to be the deciding factor of like whatever ability someone is up getting, rather than a situation of, oh, like maybe it manifests differently and so on. I'm kind of rambling, but regardless. And when Abby thought Hannah was dead, she went hard into paint. And I love there's that line from Tilda is like, fuck yeah, they want to see monsters, we'll give you fucking monsters. I'm like, that's a super hype ass line. Because I know I saw it, I want to say yesterday at the time I'm recording this. I know that Netflix, if you look on their community tabs, it's like a little gif of like Tilda saying that. And that line, so I kind of already knew that line. I've seen the context of it, but it's still like a hype-ass line, her being like, fuck yeah, they want to call us fucking monsters, we'll give them fucking monsters. I'm like, yeah! But once again, Juan isn't affected by the pheromones, so it's like, yeah. And it's also interesting to know, like, well, once again, Abby's on her succubus thing, but it does seem like it's interesting to know that it is kind of a bit of a, that it is a bit of almost an empath element that she has, because depending on how she's feeling, I wonder, is it just two modes, or is it probably like any range of emotions? Because I think with the pheromones, she could push so much on other people. Like, maybe you could think on some level, like, well, Abby's default nature probably wants people to like her, so her pheromones kind of reflect that. Kind of almost like that thing of like Misfits, like your powers are kind of yours for a particular reason. It's just kind of like, it kind of fits your personality. I think that's a kind of applicable all across the board, especially with our trio. I mean, and even, I think it's even applicable in, Sydney's case as well. But the fact is that if her pheromones are affected by her emotion, because she was consumed by rage, she was able to kind of pass it on. So I'm assuming like sadness, and other like legitimate like other emotions could probably be affected, and it probably would change the color. I mean, for right now, all we have is red and yellow. You know, it's either obsession / flirting, or pure unadulterated anger. So who knows if there are any others? Like, it could be, we could kind of get like the gambit of like colors representing different emotions that she can kind of push on someone. So. Abby went full blown and just kind of casually walking, and just like, it's like Tilda, their mask, Juan, the snipers. I was like, oh, kind of going like full leader mode right there. I even love early on, they're like, okay, Abby, you're the one that they said your name first, so you talk to them. And she's like, damn it, alphabetical order. So it's kind of interesting how that was just her walking. It's like, right, I'm not the enemy. You guys are the enemy. And basically made these guys shoot themselves. It's like, yo. And they're just like casually strolling. She did it. It's like, yo, Abby having her badass moment like that. But while this is all kind of happening, there's a conversation between Sponson and Crane that she wants these subjects alive. But once again, he's all about, no, they need to die. It's like, how many of my people are you going to sacrifice? Because he's like, it's the fucking scientists. You're the ones that kind of want to do all this shit. You're the ones that kind of made this a thing in the first place, but you're not the ones that have to clean up the mess. We are, and we're the ones putting our lives on the line. So how many of my men are going to die? How many men like me are going to die because of your decision to want to keep them around? So, but the whole thing ended up being just wanting to test them to see what their capabilities are. I mean, we learned some, this kind of also flows into the explanation of like, right, I brought it up previously that it seemed like Tilda's the only one that really, like, her powers continue to grow the most, because everyone else, like even Juan, having better control of his powers, sure, and same thing for Abby, but they were still kind of at a baseline. Obviously, Abby got some boost with, like, now it's like, well, her powers developing and shifting, that shows that the expansion's always been there. She just hadn't pushed herself. She hadn't been so consumed with rage that this happened. She's always been able to keep at least an even kilter about things. But what I thought was interesting too is she's also immune to poison gas. So I thought that was interesting. And it's like, I guess like maybe the pheromones in her body like overpower any like foreign substance like that. So like probably tear gas, poison gas, like nothing that could probably like affect her like that. Like her pheromones probably overpower it. So I think that's kind of interesting, just knowing like, oh yeah, she's kind of immune to poison gas. So, and once again, Juan, because of the sturdiness of the chupacabra, like even kind of getting zapped or whatever, like doesn't do too much to him. I think once again they're all kind of evolving in their own ways, getting stronger. So, but Abby walking up to Crane like it's nothing, and it's like, right, this could go one of two ways. You can surrender, and we're giving you the opportunity to. But sadly, Sydney surrenders because she's like, right, these people never stop. Even if you kill Dominique, it won't stop. Like, Flux will just keep coming back. Like, they'll send someone else. Because, like, she's top dog. They're answering all to her, but she still answers to, like, a board of directors. So I think she's kind of a high position in it, but, like, they probably take someone else to fill that role eventually. I could definitely see it being a situation of she doesn't make it out of this season. I could see her dying and Sponson or something like that being the go-to guy, which he's the worst guy you want in that position. You'd kind of, at the very least, you hope he dies. I'm still also throwing it out there, the whole Nate thing. The fact is his body was missing. We haven't circled back to that. That might be like an end-season stinger or something, but Sydney surrenders herself. It's also like, right, keep Alex safe. He's the one that can actually cure you now because we have a baseline of understanding how to make the cure. So she surrenders herself. Dominique's happy to see the whole transformation into Isabel, which Isabel's not too happy about it. Once again, saying like, she's super aggro, going from like, I will kill you, Alex, to I will kill you, Dominique, and stuff like that. So now it is a situation of like, cool, we are about to get cured. Everything's great. I also love Hannah being like, wait, what does she mean by like dead anymore? And it's kind of like, don't worry about it. We're not going to have that conversation. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But they wanted to say, I guess we got to go save Bert. But Tilda's like, no, she told us not to save them. Save her. Stay here. Get cured. But the problem is like, okay, so what are we going to do? You know, it's like, right, we're about to get cured, but Juan says, but why do I feel like we just made a deal with the devil? It's like, you actually did. So the fact is, there's no way he's going to 100% give you what you want, because he still needs you, because once again, he believes it's all for the sake of the human race and keeping them around and trying to make humans better and adaptable to what's going to come in the future. So curing you right now isn't going, he's probably going to slow roll it. He's probably going to try and buy himself as much time to kind of keep dragging things along. So I am curious because of, Doug was quote unquote a failure, right? I'm curious, will things be different with Hannah? Like, will there kind of be more of a success rate there? I mean, they'll get cured, and also, well, that's also the thing too. Because she might not feel as bad about it because, well, to be fair, Hannah had a time limit. She had she was going to die at like 40 because of her circumstances. Now she won't. Granted, any pain she feels, she's going to be feeling forever. So she's still going to be feeling that gunshot, which is going to be a son of a bitch. But that's going to be enough to drive her crazy. But it's still the thing of, I get to live and I don't have to die at such a young age. I can always choose when I kind of kick the bucket. So we'll see what her perspective is, because we didn't quite get that at this end of this episode. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see what our heroes end up doing. Like, will they ignore things and kind of go after Sydney? Because it's like, right, we could get cured, but do we really want to just leave her? But it's like, right, it's us against a whole science assassins organization. Granted, they've got a few allies out there. They have Zoe, and they also have Owen still out there. So, and plus anyone else they were able to get in contact with, and those they couldn't. There's a long list of, I think the superhero squad is going to come together by the end of this, which is interesting because it makes me immediately think of like Legacy's having its own super squad as well. So, Supernatural is coming together. So just interesting parallels. Like I said, either way, it's going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.